Hey everybody, welcome today to our live today. I'm Dr. Maggie Yu, and today we're talking about why IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is BS. Okay, and I know, big question, big bold statement, and without further ado, here we go, everybody. Hey everybody, I'm Maggie UMD, and I am a functional and holistic medicine physician and the creator of Transform. I'm keep dating myself, everybody, and Instagram is joining me on my phone over here for the first time. So we have a combined Instagram and the YouTube audience today. And I would say that if you want me to see your comments, which I really do want to see, watch me from YouTube right now. And those of you that are just popping in right now, I would love for you to tell me where you're watching from. If you're an alumni of any of the programs where you've worked with me, let me know where you're at right now. What problem did we end up solving for you? What are your results right now? How do you feel? Or just tell me where you're watching from. That'd be really cool. I like this. In YouTube, I already have a comment that says, not BS, IBS. Okay, I like that counterpoint, Carrie. I like it. Desiree, you're watching from Arizona. Instagram, where are we coming in from? Santa Barbara, Audra's coming in. Elizabeth, we just got off a hormone review in our hormone program with all the people from the hormone program. Elizabeth, great to see you. Love that. And then Sonia is here from Florida. Wendy, great. All right. For those of you that don't know me, I am a 28-year practicing family medicine physician that is also trained in functional medicine. And what I would love to condense the story is that about 10 years into being a family medicine practitioner and the medical director at a clinic where I trained other family medicine physicians as well. And I came down with all these mystery illnesses like early menopause at the age of 36, fibromyalgia, severe TMJ. And, what I noticed was some patterns that were really missed, in my own medical history. And I became a medical mystery that I couldn't solve with the early menopause, chronic pain, neuropathy, you name it. And I later found Instagram that it was from undiagnosed autoimmune disease. I had thyroid condition that until 10 years later, I diagnosed, no one knew about. And I later figured out that I had other things going on like mixed connective tissue disorder, neuropathy, digestive issues, food sensitivities, also dysautonomia, POTS. How many of you have what I call, a lot of people call them unicorn illnesses, right? And I don't care for unicorns as much as I like narwhals. Okay, I'm a huge fan of narwhals. And do you know why? Does anyone know why I love narwhals more than I love calling these symptoms or diseases unicorns? I know a lot of us feel like we're some super special rare unicorn, but I like to think of myself and you as a narwhal. And the reason is narwhals are real. They're not mythical, okay? And when we look at problems or complex medical conditions like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, they're complex and they're real. And there's very real causes as to why they're happening. But why am I calling it BS, right? Some of you are saying it's not BS. Other people are saying it is. Walter's coming in and Samantha's coming in, alumni in Florida. So I want to ask some questions. How many of you have had a label in the past of having IBS, irritable bowel syndrome? Type in chat, okay? Tell me how that diagnosis came to be, right? Jill's, one of the alumni, says, I used to be a unicorn. Well, no, we're just narwhals because we're very real. We're not mythical and we have solvable problems and we look really darn cool. So I love being a narwhal, just so you know, and I love solving narwhal problems. All right. So how many of you have been diagnosed with IBS? And I want to talk about the problem with that diagnosis. Okay. So as comments are coming in, and Instagram, you're watching as well, you have comments as well. Yeah, people are saying, Nikki is commenting that I was diagnosed with IBS and SIBO. So some people, because they figure out there might be an infection in their gut, then they're labeled as also IBS. And I'm curious in Nikki's case, was she earlier diagnosed with IBS first and only later to discover other diagnoses or other causes of that problem, right? Haley just said, and hi to Haley. I met Haley just last week. We did our hormone, our POTS reset. So nice to meet you. Nice to see you again, Haley. Haley says, my doctor unofficially said that I had it during a visit. So look at Haley. I know Haley's case because she was part of the POTS reset. And I actually use Haley's case as our teach one, solve one example during the POTS reset. So my question for people is, Jill said IBS that no doctor could figure out how to treat it. So how important do you guys think is getting the diagnosis of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome? How important do you guys think that is? Is that a step that's really critical in ending your symptoms relating to IBS or solving the problem? How important is a diagnosis in IBS? Type in chat. Do you guys think it's 100% the most important first step? Is it 50%? Is it 0% completely useless? What do you guys think? How important do you think that diagnosis is? Tammy Fields thinks not important. Well, let me explain from a doctor point of view, behind the scenes, what is a diagnosis, right? IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, the name implies, is a description of symptoms, okay? It's a description of symptoms. It's like saying someone has a headache, okay? So if you say someone has a headache, is that in itself a diagnosis that helps necessarily in any way? Does it solve the problem? Does it, do we know what's causing it? Do we know what the real problem is? That's a problem with some of our diagnoses. The name is just really realizing, putting into a bucket list, a group of symptoms that doctors have no other way of really treating or understanding. We're just having a name to describe the symptoms. It's an irritable bowel syndrome, okay? So as a result of that, it's based on symptoms. So if you look at the Rome 4 criteria, which is the criteria gastroenterologists and doctors use to give you a diagnosis of IBS, is actually really rather simple. Do you have pain? It really is talking about, is there pain associated with bowel symptoms, right? Number 2, is there a change in frequency? And number 3, is there a change in consistency, the quality of bowel movements, right? And I would say by that criteria, description of those symptoms, every single one of us has at some point in our life could have been diagnosed with IBS. Would you agree that's true? Type in chat, right? And if that's the case, how helpful is it to have the diagnosis that's just a description of the symptoms? It's like saying to someone, I have diarrhea for 3 months. Okay, so I qualify for IBS because you had pain with, the diarrhea. There is a change in frequency and there's a change in consistency. I have IBS. Okay. Right. So I want you to know how simple it is to get that diagnosis and why so many people in the world are actually diagnosed with IBS. If you had to guess how many people in the world actually fit the criteria, the diagnostic criteria I just gave you for having IBS, what percentage do you guys think it is? Okay. And based on data out there in the world, it's about 11.8% of people globally currently qualify for a diagnosis of IBS. Okay. Country differences. There's certain different, like North America, South America, there's different countries. Some countries can go as high as 15%. Some countries, the diagnosis rate can be about 6 to 7%. So it kind of goes to show you, like, depending on, also like, you're given that diagnosis, right? And depending on even the country you live in, or whether you're a man or woman, whether you're diagnosed with IBS or not is also different. Women are way more likely to be diagnosed with IBS than men. Women are also way more commonly go to seek medical attention than men with IBS, okay? And interestingly, women, when you look at all the different types of symptoms associated with IBS, women tend to have more constipation predominant, and while men have more diarrhea predominant, and many people are just a mixture of both. So type in chat, which kind do you think you are, right? And yet the kind isn't a further, like some people think, oh, I have IBS 2.63, and that's really helpful. Well, it's just telling me that out of all the long list of IBS symptoms, you have more constipation or you have more diarrhea. My issue with it is when you're looking at, how big of a problem IBS is, right? and how the diagnosis is so easy to qualify for. In fact, 11% of the world right now could qualify for the diagnosis of IBS. My issue with it is that the question is also how do you solve the problem? What's really causing this problem? Does it move people closer to actually what the real problem is? And one of the problems too with diagnosis is there some sort of blood test that's a secret biomarker that says, you have this blood test and now I know you have IBS, or, is there some blood test? Is there some procedure that you can do that says, you do this test and you have the diagnosis? And the answer is no. It's what we call a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning like, oh, we've ruled out ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. We've ruled out that you have traveler's diarrhea. We've ruled this out. We've ruled that. We don't have anything else we can roll in. We're going to put you in the IBS bucket. Okay. And now people are putting the Allie's jumping in with a D, diarrhea predominant. Sonia's jumping with constipation predominant, right? Nikki's jumping in D, and someone's saying mix, right? So you guys are very good at describing your symptoms, which you guys know, anybody who's worked with me knows that for me, when I work with somebody, I love data. Okay. And when I think about my own mystery illnesses and how I solved them all, it was understanding that there's data. There's facts, there's data, there's medical science and functional natural medicine putting them together, right? In the case of IBS, right, really importantly is, yes, there's a diagnosis that 11% of the world can qualify for, not helpful, okay? Because if you got the diagnosis and that means you solved the problem, then we're done. Meaning like, if the diagnosis is like, oh, you have an ear infection in your right ear, oh, you're gonna be treated with this antibiotic, and oh, 96% of you won't have that ear infection within the next 10 days. That is a diagnosis that's really important to get quickly, real important to get that treatment, and it's a solvable problem. And that diagnostic step really helps. With IBS, the problem is that diagnostic step doesn't bring people closer to a solution. What we find is when you're looking at IBS and we're looking at data out there is that most people, it is considered a chronic disease, a chronic condition that does not go away, meaning it comes and goes, comes and goes, comes and goes. It isn't a solvable problem out there in the world. Okay. And I want to ask you guys, in your own experience, have you found that IBS was solvable in your case, right? Have you ever, working with the doctors that you've worked with, whether it's conventional doctors, right, or naturopathic doctors, have you been able to solve IBS permanently? Is it a solvable diagnosis in your world or in their world? Type it in chat, right? I'm looking at over here on YouTube at some of the comments, right? Jill says, no, never had real treatment for IBS, right? So the diagnosis isn't bringing the treatment. That's the problem. Carrie also says, no, it hasn't brought me any closer to dealing with this. Audra says, no. So the answer from your own experience and from my experience is that getting the diagnosis doesn't, unlike an ear infection, which is a diagnosis that's helpful and treats the problem, getting IBS as a diagnosis doesn't solve the problem. And the data proves it out because IBS is what they call a chronic disease that waxes and wanes over time. Now, the other aspect of this is that, a diagnosis like IBS is to me very similar to a diagnosis of people with POTS, let's say postural orthostatic tachycardia. These types of problems, these diagnoses describe the symptoms, right? And just like POTS, IBS describes irritable bowel syndrome, which is the symptoms, but it doesn't help. And the reason we have that diagnosis is because conventional regular doctors don't know what's causing the problem, right? Because if we know what's causing the problem, we'd be calling it something else, wouldn't we, right? It's really interesting that how many people with the label IBS later will find out through either testing or experience, they start to figure out, oh, wow, there are actually other things that are going on that's causing this problem, of which we think of it like a pyramid. I think of it like a pyramid. Like at the top of the pyramid is, at the top is everybody with IBS, right? But at the bottom of it is all the feeders that are feeding into this list of symptoms that we call IBS. And that's really what's missing from the conversation when we're talking about conventional medical care, right? Think about how many, I'm going to ask, what do you guys think is the current treatment for IBS? What do you guys think is the current treatment for IBS? Type it in chat. What have you received for your IBS, right? I think about somebody mentioned diet, somebody said, Nancy said, FODMAP diet has helped. Sure. Some diet changes has helped. Great. Right. By the way, those diets aren't current treatment because conventional and traditional doctors will tell you eat anything you want. Have you seen what they feed people in hospitals? Okay. So Carrie says antidepressants. How many people? Oh, this is a good topic, Carrie. How many people have been, do you think, gets diagnosed or misdiagnosed as having a mental health disorder prior to receiving an IBS diagnosis? Or the diagnosis IBS, and at the same time, they're being diagnosed with having anxiety or stress-related IBS. How many people are in that category? Type in chat, right? Lisa says, my son was advised to see physical therapy, GI, gastroenterologist, psychologist to combat symptoms. And Lisa Johnson, going to see the physical therapist, the gastroenterologist, and the psychologist, did it solve the problem for your son? I would love some to hear an answer on that, right? So Allie mentioned medications. So by and large, the treatment are medications. And by and large, the treatment for medications is to deal with the symptoms. If you're diarrhea predominant, we're going to give you a drug to slow down your bowel movements. If you're constipation predominant, we're going to give you a drug to help your bowels move more, right? Symptom relief, right? And for that reason, can medications, while you're taking them, help with some of the symptoms? And the answer is it can. It can, right? But does it solve the problem? Lisa mentioned that her son, she just answered in chat. Thank you, Lisa. Those of you who are watching on YouTube and or Facebook and commented, thank you. And Lisa said her son, after going to see the GI doctor, the psychologist, and a physical therapist, found no help for that problem, didn't solve the problem. And curiously, those of you that tried medications for IBS, did it solve the problem? Did it, like, long term? What was your experience with medications? Type in chat. I would love to hear what some of your experiences has been, right? And Nancy said some it helped with some of the symptoms. Peacock Production says when you're stuck in fight or flight, digestion gets lower priority. Oh my God, Peacock Productions, you are a woman or a man after my heart. So, okay, let's go into why I say that IBS is BS. We put the label of IBS as doctors on patients on a condition that we can only really just describe their symptoms, of which we don't know what are the underlying causes. There's some severe limitations. And this is my problem, my rage against that diagnosis or that term is because I've never met someone with IBS where that label solved the problem, right? And it is a great way for you to be aware of your symptoms, though, because symptoms are a data point. Okay, hear me out. Okay, your symptoms are more important than the label because your own physical experience with your body on what is actually triggering it, what makes it better or worse. Someone had mentioned in chat earlier that they noticed their IBS is worse certain times of the month. I assume they're female, right? How many of you have noticed that? Now I'm asking you for data beyond what their normal labs are, okay? How many of you noticed that your IBS symptoms started after the birth of a child or during your pregnancy or after your pregnancy, right? When you delivered a child. Oh, I got Kathy here joining me. We have another instructor from Transform. Kathy, you and I just finished a whole hormone session with our hormone group. I was just going into how could hormones actually be related with IBS? Like one of the reasons you and I think IBS is BS is because we just literally came out of a session reviewing and working on hormones with a number of clients. And that is the question, right? How many of you are starting to think for a second right now, right? And Kathy, I saw you do the eye roll thing, right? Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted. So think back. How many of you noticed your IBS symptoms started with perimenopause, like meaning between the age of 35 and 55? How many of you noticed certain times of the month is worse or better? How many of you noticed is related with after pregnancy? And if you're a dude, okay, what about certain times of the day? Do you notice your symptoms are worse towards the end of the day? If you're a dude, did you notice the onset of this happened for you around 15 to 25 is one time frame for a guy. The next time frame for a guy is 35 to 45. And if that's the time when it started, could it be hormone related? Kathy?
Can you hear me now?
And
okay. Yeah.
I love the Canadian internet.
That's what we'll blame it on, not that I forgot to
right?
the mute button. I couldn't sit this one out. I was like, when you decided to talk about IBS is BS, I was all over it, because this is something that I don't know. It's just one of those things that just drives me nutty. I can't decide if it drives me more nutty than you or not, because I know you're pretty passionate about this too. But yeah, it's just a catch-all, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many different root causes, and hormones is one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Well, and how many people have been told their labs are normal? When there's a lack of a biomarker or a specific test that says, ha, this is the cause of your IBS, or you have IBS, most people with IBS are actually told their labs are normal, your scope is normal, this is normal, that's normal, right? And because their limited testing is normal, then there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm going to give you guys a little secret hint, okay? You don't know how many charts of people with IBS are written with this term, okay? Do you know what we call people with IBS where all labs are normal? We call them supratentorial syndrome as doctors. Do you guys know what supratentorial syndrome is? Tentorium, the tentorium is the base of your brain, okay? Supratentorial syndrome means is above the tent, meaning it's
cuckoo.
Oh, cuckoo puffs.
Boy, you're giving all the secrets away. If I ever hear that terminology in my doctor's
it's been,
or
I mean, I've seen it in hundreds of charts, and it's doctor speak, so that even if I'm referring someone, if someone's referring someone to the psychiatrist and you send the medical records and it'll say IBS supratentorial syndrome, it's basically telling the psychiatrist that we got a cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs person here. And even if you send someone to pain management, let's say someone has a lot of bowel pain and they're like, oh, I'm going to send you to the pain doctor, right? Then, we know if we write hypochondriac and you see the notes or somebody else sees the notes, you're going to be all pissed off at us. So there's code speak, it's a code speak that we have for letting other doctors know that we think our patient we're sending to you is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Yeah.
And actually, I mean, I'm smiling here, but that actually, that's pretty sad at the same time. That's really sad, because how many of us go into the doctors desperate for help, and that's one of the things we're like, I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be judged. I know a lot of people, I've talked to many people who, if they're on antidepressants and the doctor says, are you on any antidepressants? They're like, no, I'm not. Because they know as soon as they disclose that information, that suddenly it's like, oh, okay, it's stress, it's this, it's that, it's, whoosh.
Well,
the eye rolls, we call them.
But here's the interesting thing, a lot of the medications. So I know when I was talking about POTS last week, I was talking about how, did you know in studies, but the population here, people here, that by the time people get the POTS diagnosis, 70% of them actually have been misdiagnosed prior with having a psychiatric disorder. And so it's important to think about if you have IBS. And for me, if I think about it, if I was constipated all the time, I was diarrhea all the time, I had unpredictable bowels that goes rotating back and forth all the time. If I had, problems with gas or bloating, or certain times of the month it's worse, or for no reason it seems like it gets worse, or you have to plan your life around restrooms, right? Meaning I can't even go on the street. I'm scared to even go to the mall or to do these bunch of errands because I have to know where the bathrooms are going to be. What do you think is the likelihood of having some natural anxiety or depression related to the severity of these symptoms, right? For reals, right? And think back, before IBS, or before you had these symptoms, before you had this level of uncertainty in your life, were you an anxious person? Were you a person with ADD? No. Were you a depressed person? Were you a dumb person? Were you a crazy person? Right? You didn't suddenly become that because now you have these symptoms. that are really impacting on your mental health. Nor is that the cause. It's one of the victims of the problem.
Yeah. Going back to hormones, my IBS issues started when I was 12 years old. And so I had it the whole time, like right through till about age 21, 22, when I finally started looking into alternatives, and I was able to get rid of it. But my whole teenage life, I had IBS. And just like you said, where's the bathroom? What can I eat? What can't I eat while I'm on the road traveling with friends to, a retreat center or whatever we were going to? And the number of times that I had to jump out of the car and run into a bathroom, getting off the highway because I wasn't going to make it our whole trip. It was awful and so anxiety producing.
Kathy, you're actually a really great case study that demonstrates some of the root causes around IBS that nobody knows about, because solving your case took decades and there were layers. I love the fact that nobody we work with need decades, like, which could talk about weeks or months, right? But for you and your journey, I mean, think about that. As a teenager, you already had quote unquote IBS, planned your life around restrooms, like all this anxiety and stuff. And then we're talking about hormones here. Okay. Do you think it had anything to do with your hormones, Kathy?
I don't know. The fact that it started at 12, right when I started my cycles, maybe.
Boom. Right. Data. Go ahead.
But here's the sad part is I didn't know what was going on. Of course, I didn't know that it had anything to do with my hormones. I didn't know the root cause. So how I self-medicated was with Rolaids, like Tylenol. Rolaids. I, as a 13-year-old girl, was walking around, never left the house without Rolaids. And as soon as I felt like some issues coming on, I would have 5, 6, 7 of those, and it would often stop the disaster pants, as I call it.
Right. Needed medication at that time, whether it's over-the-counter prescription. But this points to a problem. The over-the-counter medications, which are the Rolaids, the antacids, the Pepcid, the omeprazole, the Prilosec, the prescription pills, the purple pill, what they do is they say, we're just going to shut off some really big steps in your digestion. Okay, especially the stomach acid step. We're just going to shut that off. And temporarily, that'll help some of the symptoms. But in the long run, actually creates really big bad problems. Somebody mentioned that they had SIBO or they had other infections and stuff. What do you think turning stomach acid does? If you turn stomach acid off in your stomach, because temporarily it makes you feel better, but you shut off stomach acid, what do you think happens to your body as a welcome mat for infection? Because what do you think is the role of stomach acid here for? One of the roles. Do you think acid, like, why do you think we use vinegar to disinfect? Acid kills germs. And then we wonder why people taking Rolaids or Pepcid or Prilosec for a decade, suddenly they're like thinking like, I have this infection, I have that infection, I have SIBO, I have Candida, I got this, I got COVID. Why did I get COVID and my friend didn't? Like, what do you think happens with medications that shut off digestion steps when each step of digestion is protection against infection? Right? That's a really good example right here where that layer is coming in. Kathy takes over the counter medication, or somebody goes to a doctor to prescribe a medication to actually alter a major step in digestion, and downstream causing more disease. More causes later on. Samantha's like, no bueno, right? But we digress here, right? What I wanted to point out here is that I have a rage against the diagnosis because it creates a bias to me where, because you have a diagnosis, your doctor says, that allows me then to prescribe medications to treat the symptoms without identifying what the real cause of the problem is, with which there's many things. There's many things. Because Kathy's case just demonstrated, she's 12 years old. Could the onset of puberty, a change in hormones, cause this? Yes. Somebody else mentioned certain times of the month it caused this, right? Jill here has a comment and she says, I was put on, could medication iatrogenically, meaning doctor produced, IBS later, meaning I was on acid blockers prescribed for 25 plus years. It over time had made everything so much worse in the long run. Right now, we have a whole category of IBS that's made worse because the treatments of the medications themselves down the road actually cause even a more complex, more different causes for IBS to come out, right? Jill, that's huge, right? And Elizabeth says, I can't wait to keep learning from you, right? Mind blown daily, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, so this is why for me, the diagnosis name even makes me mad. It makes me mad. And a number of people that are also misdiagnosed with something else prior to being diagnosed with IBS makes me mad. And then the number of people with IBS that later on find out what's really going on, right? How many people were labeled as IBS and through working with me or us or in some other way found out the specific real problem that it really was? How many people discovered after the diagnosis of IBS the specific problem it really was? Type in chat, okay? Because I can tell you right now, just even looking at the data, okay, commonly, okay, co-diagnosis, misdiagnosed are people with celiac disease. A lot of people with autoimmune disease or celiac disease are misdiagnosed as having IBS for decades prior to realizing it was celiac disease, a problem with gluten. I'm going to use Kathy's case as an example. How many years did it take you to identify one of the main culprits of your IBS?
I was 22 when we finally started to turn around. So 10 years. Yeah.
And in your case, what was it? Was it anxiety?
It was hormonal, definitely hormonal. But there was also a food component, not that I was allergic to milk, but that I had lactose intolerance.
But there's more later.
That contributed to it. Yeah.
Right? So lactose intolerance is not an allergy to milk, guys. It's a digestion problem. Mm-hmm. How much training do you guys think your GI docs get on digestion? How many months, weeks, days, hours do you think your gastroenterologist or your naturopathic physician gets on digestion? Right? Because lactose intolerance is not a food allergy problem. Your allergist is going to laugh you out of their office. Okay? Not my problem. Can't be the cause of this problem.
Oh, yes. And so just another little tidbit, little bit of data here. I went to a gastroenterologist, had the whole barium swallow thing done, all the workups. And I remember being very young, like 12, and telling the doctor that when I ate steak, I was okay, but if I ate a hamburger, I wasn't. And he's like, well, that doesn't make any sense because it's the same food.
Supratentorial syndrome you had.
Yeah. And it was only later, there was the lactose intolerance, but it was only later that I also recognized fat absorption problem, right?
She couldn't digest the higher fat of a hamburger versus a lean steak. Digestion problem again. Bing, bing, bing. Like, do you guys hear okay, so Jonathan in chat said that he thought it was about 2 hours on digestion. Somebody mentioned Peacock Productions thought it was 2 days. Catherine thought 1 class, and it's none of the above. Okay? Everything I learned about digestion, I learned after medical school, after 10 years of family medicine practice, on my own dime, on my own time, because I had those problems that I couldn't solve with all the medical training that I had, with it being zero around digestion. The only thing that we learned about digestion was in the middle of a pharmacology class. We learned what drug we should prescribe if anyone comes up with any of the IBS syndrome is Prilosec, which is to turn off stomach acid. That's the only, that was digestion training. Okay. So anybody coming with digestion problem, Prilosec, right? That's all we learned because it's all we had to learn. That's all we had to learn. Okay. And to this day, when you even go to, you think going to a gastroenterologist, do you think they're the specialist in digestion? Well, The only thing they're trained in is what drug to prescribe for the symptom that you have. So diarrhea, slow the bowels down. Constipation, speed the bowels up. Heartburn or bloating or pain, Prozac, right? Turn off stomach acid. That's because that's the offer when you actually go see a gastroenterologist, is they are the experts in knowing what drug to prescribe for the symptom that you have. It's what I call the fatal flaw problem. The fatal flaw in medicine today is the one symptom, one drug, one symptom, one drug solution. And that is the way that we train doctors about everything. Mm-hmm. And you can see how in IBS, it doesn't do the problem justice because it doesn't solve, doctors aren't trained to ask deeper questions on what those underlying causes are. There we go. I just want to see if there are, and I just want to make sure the team starred any questions. If you have any questions, make sure you put it in the chat. So if I have time, I can do a little Q&A here, or a big Q&A here. Yeah. And Samantha said, it makes us feel like our medical system is failing us. I think the diagnostic system is one of the problems that's failing us as well. The focus, yeah, go ahead. The focus on the diagnosis. I think a lot of healthcare dollars, time is actually spent and wasted on trying to get a diagnosis. And for an infection, ear infection, that makes sense. For something like IBS, I'd rather 10% of those dollars went into training doctors better to understand the causes and identifying those causes so we can solve the problem quicker and earlier for people and easier. Kathy?
So I actually have a question for you. I know the answer, but I think this is a good question. Have you ever worked with anybody who only had the diagnosis of IBS and no other issues, no other health problems, no other anything, just IBS? That was the only thing on their big lung.
Never, ever, ever. And at this point, I'm like probably 20,000 patients in. And that's the fun of it. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think about myself as a medical detective. And if somebody comes and they say, my one and only problem is IBS. And yeah, we'll get the information about IBS, but I'll be asking questions nobody's thought about asking. I did it on this live. How many people have ever asked you the question, or someone with IBS, the question of, when did it start? Did it start during like puberty? Did it have anything to do with the pregnancy, certain times of the month, after delivery, baby, perimenopause? How about that, right? Melanie Tucker says postmenopause, right? Who the heck is asking you that question, right? Nobody. They're not asking that question. Now, somebody else is, like Kathy mentioned, she had to use Rolaids, and Jill mentioned she was put on proton pump inhibitors for 25 years. Like, that's one of the first questions I ask is going to be, you're coming to me for IBS. What is your medication and supplement history with this? Because that's going to tell me a lot about how much of your current symptoms were iatrogenically, meaning doctor or pharmaceuticals created, right? As an underlying cause, right? So for me, that's 90% of population IBS. There's this whole drug-induced or the bands that they use causing problems further down. Now, someone mentioned, we talked about a little bit about fibromyalgia earlier. How many people have these other narwhal diseases like fibromyalgia, POTS, right? Chronic fatigue syndrome, Lyme, right? SIBO. How many people have had these other diagnoses in their life, autoimmune diseases of any kind, all kind? And also have IBS. Haley's a good example, right? Haley was in chat earlier. She said that she has IBS, but at the same time, I think when I was reviewing her case on the POTS reset that we had, I don't think IBS was even written as one of her symptoms, right? I think Olivia mentioned, like, what I did was, you know, someone comes to me and she said, oh, I got POTS. I got, let's say, dizziness or nausea or anxiety. I already know that the likelihood that person also has symptoms called IBS is at 100%. I really haven't met someone with, let's say, fibromyalgia, someone with POTS, someone with Crohn's or or rheumatoid arthritis who didn't have symptoms or diagnosis of IBS, because what I call like associations, because they're connected and in fact they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. Can I tell you that IBS is just the bowel manifestation of some of these other diagnoses that you're going through? Meaning, Could IBS, let's say, who do we have? Melanie in here? Could IBS be the gut manifestation of her menopausal problems, her hormone imbalance? Could that be the victim? And it's showing up that way as IBS. Okay. Right? Jill has lots of autoimmune disorders. Let's say Jill had Sjogren's and scleroderma, right? Could it be that her IBS is the victim, the gut manifestation of her autoimmune conditions? Just another target of that autoimmune attack in the bowels. Now we label as IBS, right? Catherine said, "You've helped me stop years of taking Prilosec and never felt better." So, I mean, could it be that the IBS is a manifestation of too many medications and it's a permanent side effect of taking a medication for 10 years, right? That's the piece here. And the answer always is yes. IBS is never IBS. That's why I call it BS. IBS is always about something else. Have you guys, take that to the bank, please, 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 right? IBS is never about IBS. It's always 100% of the time about something else, which is, what do we do? How do I work with, what do we do? How do we work with clients? For example, we have, no matter what the diagnosis is, you come to me, right? Whether you think it's menopause, whether you think it's POTS, whether you think it's rheumatoid arthritis, or you think it's IBS. It's really important for people to come to us. For me, I can't help you if you're just watching this video, right? Because I don't know anything about you, right? So really importantly, one of the first things when people work with us is there's a link in chat, they book a call with our team and they tell us about what's going on because I need data. And notice the information you're telling me in chat and when you talk to us, I look at it as data, okay? Because that's helpful, right? And the way that I like to, and Kathy and I like to work with people is we want to look at these problems and be like, let's look at what's the real cause of these problems based on this person's history. And for some people, it's going to be, wow, hormones was the really big issue here. For somebody else, it's their thyroid. For somebody else, it's their autoimmune condition. We were talking with Ryan, and I think we were talking with Elizabeth, like even talking about how don't ignore this whole thing of like this thyroid thing as like, oh, I also take thyroid medication. Well, up to 90% of thyroid disorders is an autoimmune disease. So if you have a thyroid problem and you also have IBS, what do you think is the likelihood that your IBS is because there's also an immune attack against your bowels? And who's connected the two for you? Ever. Mm-hmm. So I love to take all takers of impossible to solve narwhal diseases or chronic diseases and be able to get to know, get the data from you, what's going on. And I like to figure out what the solutions are going to look like for each individual person, right? So yeah, we can work with people online around hormone issues, thyroid issues, food, digestion issues, food allergy issues, autoimmune issues, you name it. And I love the fact that we're able to do that online, collecting not just your data, but also your testing and data globally, right? And then as a result, we can say that the reason for Samantha's issue is XYZ. And Samantha just says, I love how y'all treat everyone individually and don't use the same approach with everyone. And I'm going to ask everybody in chat that I've worked with individually right now, that we've worked with individually, tell me a hidden cause to the BS in your life that you found out. That's no longer a BS now, right? How many of your medical symptoms or diagnoses I call BS, through your work with us, you were able to identify the exact cause or causes of that problem and you were able to fix it. That's all I'm interested in, right? So type in chat, right? For Allie, right? I love how you get to the root of the problem. Allie, write down what one root you found out that was shocking to you. That was a game changer for you. Olivia said, Carrie said, Hashimoto's from you. Boom. Carrie was actually part of, we were doing a review of 3 different people's thyroid results. Okay. And it was like, I love how things come in threes. And that day it was in threes. And Kathy, I mean, I'd love you to that was a mind-blowing session.
Oh, that was so great, because we often will say, I've heard Dr. Maggie say this all the time on a live. She'll say, oh, 90% of the people we work with have an autoimmune thyroid condition, right? And it's just sort of this number that she says. but it's very, very true. And in this one session that we had with our clients, we had 3 people, and all of them did not know that they had an autoimmune thyroid condition. And it's not like they were, 18 years old. They've gone their whole life with all these health issues, and nobody ever found one of the root causes was an autoimmune thyroid condition, which means an attack on the
against. And here's a clue, like Instagram's watching YouTube. I mean, those 3 examples were really interesting because they presented, number one, different stages of the attack. Okay, so I would say someone was like stage 1, someone stage 2, someone stage 3. All 3 cases, though, the person themselves didn't know that they had an autoimmune disease against their thyroid, nor their doctors. One person in the case has been taking thyroid medication, I think, for over a decade. And even had ultrasound and other type of tests that clearly, to me, showed that, I mean, her thyroid was so shrunken and scarred, it's what I call end stage, like thyroid destruction. But yet none of her doctors who read the result for the ultrasound even said, hey, you might have an autoimmune condition that's actually trying to kill your thyroid. We might want to look at that because it might be attacking other places. You may have problems with your other hormones, or you may have problems with your joints, or you may have problem with your brain fog, because there's other targets that this condition could be attacking, not just your thyroid. That was one person. The other 2 people didn't even know they had thyroid problems, and were told the thyroid labs were normal. And they both not only had thyroid problems, but had autoimmune thyroid problems, right? We just saw a quote that came out. Samantha said, Samantha was watching that review, and she said, I'm already there. I've never even heard of PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, a hormone imbalance pattern, until working with you and the team. The hormone info, thyroid info, so many years being told I'm fine, and now running the right tests, and I understand. And that's just around hormone imbalances, right? So I want to point out to everybody just how it is that I love to work with people is I got to get the story. I got to get the data, the facts, so I understand what's going on, number one. And then number 2, we work with people around the world, people online, so that you can access us anywhere. You don't have to be in Washington. You don't have to be in Canada to access Kathy or me. And then the testing is really critical that we provide. Number 1, you got to get the right testing. Number 2, you got to get you just got to be educated, meaning I got to tell you what's wrong with it, what's going on. Kathy and I love being able to, when we go over those 3 people's thyroid results, for example, being able to say, this is your problem.
Yeah.
This is the Achilles heel. This is what your doctor missed. And most importantly, here's how you fix it. Boom. Here's how you fix it. In the case of that person, who is completely on the wrong thyroid dose, for example, right? That's a game changer to, number 1, know it's autoimmune and there are other autoimmune targets with their other hormones, right? So fixable, and know how to calm an autoimmune attack. But number 2, an immediate thyroid dose medication change that could be life-changing for the situation. That all those 10 years of getting prescribed thyroid meds and being told her labs are fine didn't solve, right? So change and results can happen that quickly. That's what we do. All right. Did I miss any questions anywhere? I just want to make sure. There we go.
There were a couple of questions on there were a couple of questions about vagus nerve and.
Oh, I like it. Madai has a question. Thanks for jumping in, Madai. All right. So the question is IBS correlated to nervous system dysfunction? Meaning, if you fix your hyper nervous system, you can cure or relieve IBS symptoms. Oh, I love this question, Madai. You are smart and you're barking up the right tree. So I am a nervous system specialist. And not in the way that your neurologist thinks that they are a nervous system specialist. A neurologist who deals with, I guess, brain-related illnesses are not the expert on the nervous system. Your nervous system is way bigger than your brain. And in the nervous system, there's the most important nervous system that deals with bowels is the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is a giant network of nerves. And there is 2 parts of it. One is called a sympathetic nervous system, and the other is the parasympathetic. Sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. And guess what happens if you are, for some reason, for whatever multiple reasons, your nervous system is wired to be more on the sympathetic fight or flight. What do you think happens to the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest system? Right? Normally they're supposed to go like this, but if this is on a sympathetic overdrive for a variety of reasons, not your fault, we get suppression of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. And 100% of people with IBS have some sort of nervous system involvement that's causing the parasympathetic nervous system not to step up and balance. There is absolutely an imbalance in the nervous system. 100% is linked to hormone imbalances that we just talked about, thyroid disorders that we just talked about, right? And then someone also mentioned digestion problems caused by drugs or underlying genetics or by other issues. So we just showed you a model with which, IBS is a nervous system disorder at its root, at its core is one of the main problems there, and how it involves not your gut. This is why your gastroenterologist can't solve IBS, okay? Because who's the doctor for your autonomic nervous system? There's nobody out there to save you from an autonomic nervous system disorder because they don't understand it. I love being an autonomic nervous system specialist, and I understand everything that is the levers that bring it up and down. So that's an awesome question.
Great. And then we have another one from Nancy. Could hormone replacement therapy help with IBS the way we think it may help with MCAS? Mast Cell Activation.
Depends. It depends. It's the one fatal flaw problem here, okay? So she says that hormone replacement could help MCAS, which is a histamine and an allergy problem. Could it? It could. Could it make it worse just as much? Yes, it can. All of you out there with mast cell or hormone imbalances, and if you've been told that all it takes is for you to take some hormones and that's going to solve your problem, you're being misled with the fatal flaw problem that I see. When we work on, we have, by the way, if you're not already subscribed on YouTube, click over the link to this video to YouTube and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I know that less than 10% of you watching me right now are subscribers on the YouTube channel, and it really helps a lot of people see this more when you are subscribed. And even better, when you give me a boom in the comment. Go to YouTube, subscribe, and give me a boom in the comment. That really helps share this. The reason I say that is because on my YouTube channel with over 1,500 videos right now, about 15% to 20% of them deal with hormones and what a complex issue it is. And I am a hormone expert. This is why I love the nervous system, because you can't be a nervous system expert if you're not a hormone expert. I'm going to tell you that. And being a hormone expert is a hell of a lot more than should I give you hormones or not. Those of you who are watching right now, who just came out of the hormone program and Hormone Solutions and was reviewing hormones and learning from me, do you think that solving IBS, like, what do you think? What's your opinion? Those of you who are just in class with us and working with us, in consultation with us, do you think that IBS can be solved by taking hormones? Yes or no? And I'm going to say the answer is, and I'm sure other people will chime in as well, is that the most important thing about understanding hormones, just like your understanding about the autonomic nervous system, is balance. You got to know what's wrong with hormones, what the patterns are, meaning proper testing, proper working with providers who understand what hormone balance is. Remember, Samantha Fitzgerald just said she didn't even know what PCOS is. Some people that are writing this are healthcare providers themselves, or working with healthcare providers before, for decades before working with me. So we got to know what the pattern is. And then once we know what the patterns are, I love figuring out with hormones what the cause is. Just today, going over like 6 different people's hormones results with them, I was able to say, hey, you got a kerosene under the fire over here. Whether that's your nervous system, whether that's your mast cell and histamine issue, whether that's the POTS, whether that's your autoimmune issue, or whether that's that medication you're on right now. Right? So when we look at hormones as a bigger picture like that, I am the master of teaching people, showing people how to quickly balance their hormones. When your hormones are balanced, every single health symptom will improve, period, regardless of whether it's mast cell, whether it's POTS, whether it's IBS or BS. Okay, I'm just telling you that right now. Is that 100% of the people I work with have a problem with their hormones that none of their doctors recognize. And if everybody there is just, oh, then you just give them hormones. Well, why would you give someone hormones if they're really high on a certain hormone, right? Or if, you know, the underlying reason why their hormones are so off is because they're taking hormones inappropriately prescribed at inappropriate doses, and that's what's causing their problem. Would you give more hormones? Like half the time I'm trying to get people to help. Half the time the solution is actually getting them off the hormones or lowering their hormones or changing the balance on their hormones, or they don't even need hormones and they need to break down their hormones better. Part of your bowels is your liver. And if there's a liver problem, you don't break down your hormones well, you get an accumulation of certain hormones, you're screwed with a really imbalanced hormone profile that fuels disease, like autoimmune issues, like POTS, like fibromyalgia. Was that a lot? Is that too much? Okay, cool.
It's not BS, that's for sure.
All right, perfect. All right, everybody. I hope that was really helpful for you guys. Thank you. Give me in chat, like, so right now, I have one ask, okay? If there's anything that you learned from this today, is there a person, is there one or two people that you think could benefit from even 1% of what I talked about today? If so, click share. Share this video and share it with them, right? Or comment with their name in chat if you're on Facebook, so you can tag them, or on Instagram if you want to tag somebody with it. If this is something that you think one or two people could share, that'd be really incredible. That's my ask. And then if any of you want to solve your problem with IBS or any other BS or any sort of narwhal illnesses, there's a link in chat. Book a call with our team because I need data from you. I can't help you by you watching this. I can help you by getting some data and information so we understand the problem better and can help identify beyond the diagnosis, beyond the BS, what's really causing these problems. And that's how you can solve these problems.
I love it. Absolutely.
All right, everybody. I think that is a wrap. And somebody can help me press. There we go. Okay, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and sharing is caring. Everybody who's watching right now, give me a boom in chat, either the emoji with a boom, or type the word boom in chat. That would be really great. I would really appreciate that. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Bye, everyone.